nurturing our friendships isn't indulgent. It really is very good medicine that can help us to live longer and happier lives. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. A big welcome back to the Redefining Midlife podcast. Now, just before we dive into today's conversation, I want to share something special that's coming up soon. On Saturday, the 8th of November, I'm going to be co-hosting the next Shifting Tides event with my good friend and past podcast guest, Dr. Sian Hebron, who's a specialist GP in women's health and menopause. This event's going to be held at Noosa Springs Golf and Spa Resort. And this is a full day experience that's been designed to guide you through menopause, midlife, and what's coming up in this next half of life for you. And Dr. Sian is going to be sharing her incredible medical expertise, while I'll be leading practical sessions on how to navigate the many changes and transitions of midlife. And I'll show you how to create your very own personal wellness plan. Now, this is a whole day about education, about connection, and about empowerment. And the women who attended our last event described it just like that. Here's an example of two testimonials of what women had to say. The first one says, Dr. Sian's medical knowledge and Jo's practical solutions, coupled with their lived experiences, helped me feel empowered during these midlife transitions, of which there are many, not just menopause. And then the second testimonial says, allow yourself to be immersed in the knowledge and the nurture that Jo and Dr. Sian offer. The opportunity that they provide to focus on you and your journey while sharing their experiences and their hearts is a gift. So this is a really special day, and thank you to those ladies who said those kind words. So if you would love a day that combines practical tools, that combines expert insights, and having some of those really meaningful connections and conversations, come along, bring a friend, or maybe just come along by yourself and make a special day for yourself. And you'll find the link to the tickets in the show notes or on my website, joclarkcoaching.com. And now, speaking of connection, that brings me perfectly to today's topic. And that is why friendships in midlife matter more than before. Now, we often on the podcast talk about health in terms of nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress. But connection, the important people in our lives, is one of the most powerful influences on how we feel and how we live, especially in midlife. And this year has happened to be a big one for me when it comes to celebrating friendship milestones. Now, I've marked 50 years with a very special friend I first met in grade 3. And then I've got 45 years with my high school girlfriends, as well as 40 years with one of my closest friends from university. And when I just stop and think about that, it feels both surreal and incredibly special. And these friendships, well, they've changed and evolved over the decades, that's for sure. And we've gone from sharing our lunchbox snacks, talking about the latest pop star that might have been on Countdown on Sunday night, or we were talking about what's been in the Dolly magazine, or perhaps going on to then, when I'm older, on university assignments, to now we're sharing stories about our family, our health, and what's coming up for us in this season of life. But I've also noticed just how easily some of these friendships can slip away without us realizing, because life's busy, work takes over, family responsibilities, and then before we know it, months or perhaps even years have gone by. So today, I want to explore why friendships in midlife matter more than ever. And it's not just for our emotional well-being either, but it's for our physical health too. And we're going to be talking about why friendships are essential for our happiness and longevity, how they actually change and morph as we move through our life, and what to do when they falter or end. And at the end, I've got some really practical ways that you can use to keep them strong and meaningful. So if you can, grab a pen and paper, or perhaps just save this episode to come back to later. And I'm going to be sharing some reflection prompts and ideas that you might just want to write down. That's why you need that pen and paper. Okay, so let's just start with why friendships really matter. Now, we know on a personal level how good it is to have special friends, to have someone to confide in, to have a good belly laugh with. It's good for the soul. And we also have science and research backing up what we know innately to be true. The Harvard study of adult development is the longest running study on human happiness. And it began more than 85 years ago, and it's followed hundreds of people throughout their lives. And what the researchers found was fascinating. They discovered that the people who were most satisfied in their relationships at the age of 50 were also the healthiest at the age of 80. And also, what's so interesting about the findings is that it wasn't money, career success, or status that predicted happiness or long life. What it was a quality of their relationships. Good relationships act almost like a stress buffer. They protect not only our bodies and our minds from the wear and tear of life. Another large review analysed data from over 300,000 people, and they found those with strong relationships had about a 50% chance of living longer than those with weaker ones. So that's kind of like the same benefit as giving up smoking or maintaining a healthy weight, which is quite incredible. So when we talk about friendship, we're not talking about something that's just kind of nice to have. We're talking about something that is essential for our health and for our happiness and for our longevity. So nurturing our friendships isn't indulgent. It really is very good medicine that can help us to live longer and happier lives. Now, one thing that we've all experienced is that friendships do evolve over time. And a Dutch sociologist by the name of Gerald Molenhorst discovered that we can replace half of our social circle every 7 years. So just think about that for a moment. Half of the people in your life today might not be the same people that you surround yourself with 7 years from now. So it's all just a natural part of life. People move, jobs change, families grow, and sometimes we just simply head in different directions. There's that old quote that sums up really well, that you have friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for a lifetime. Now, for many women in midlife, that whole shift can stir up a lot of emotions. You might miss how easy it used to be to see friends at school drop-offs or sport events, or maybe even a workplace. Now in our lives, it might take a little bit more effort and planning to connect. And I've definitely experienced this in my own life. Some friendships, well, they've deepened, while others have quietly faded. And I don't know about you, but there's so much joy when I do reconnect with some of my old friends, like those from grade 3, those from high school, and those university friendships that have lasted decades. But there's also a sadness when others change or perhaps slip away. And it is important to acknowledge that grief, because losing a friendship can feel every bit as painful as losing a romantic relationship. Sometimes there may not even be an argument or a falling out. It's just distance or a change, and that can be even harder to process. We all change over time, and that can sometimes mean that you may have a lot less in common than you once had. So if you've experienced that firsthand, please know it's completely normal. And it doesn't mean that the friendship that you had wasn't real or it wasn't meaningful. It just simply means that you've both moved into new chapters of your life. And I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly. Now, another thing that can feel challenging is making new friends in midlife. Now, making new friends at this stage of life can feel a whole lot different, but it's still very possible. And often it's deeply rewarding. Now, when we were younger, it happened naturally through school, through university, or through our children's activities, or perhaps even through work. And these days, a lot of people might find it takes a lot more intention. But the connections that we form now often come from shared values or interests. And I've found that the new friendships I've made are through travel, through my wellness events, and through some of the community gatherings I've had. And some have even started with a chat after a talk, or perhaps a message on Instagram, or meeting someone through mutual friends. And I've also made some really special friends online, and even through this podcast, which is an absolute joy. So when we stay open, when we stay curious, new connections often have a way of finding us. And I also want you to know that you are never too old to find your people. You're just in a season where you get to choose them more intentionally. So let's just talk about that. Becoming more intentional and nurture and investing in your friendships. Because let's face it, good friendships, they just don't happen. They need care and they do need attention. Because a few years ago, I realized just how easily my own friendships had slipped into the background. My life had become really full and my spare time was limited. So I could sometimes find myself going weeks, months, and sometimes years without talking to people that I cared deeply about. Maybe you've had the same thing happen yourself. Now, connection is one of the 6 wellness pillars in my Better Than Before membership. And this year, I personally made sure it became one of my wellness goals that I was going to nail. And that is, I was going to connect with at least one friend every week. Now, sometimes that for me means a coffee, maybe a lunch, a walk, a Zoom chat, or maybe it's just a message to check in. And I actually schedule it in my planner and I treat that like I treat awaited specialist appointment. Because if I don't write it down, if I don't commit to it, then the week just fills up and it won't happen. Now, I can honestly say that since I've done that, it's changed how I feel. Because these small, deliberate moments, well, they've lifted my mood, they've reduced stress, and they have helped me to feel more grounded. And they've reminded me that connection doesn't have to be grand or it doesn't have to be time consuming. It just needs to be consistent and that it's me that needs to make an effort. So if you're wanting to nurture your own friendships, here are just a few ideas that you can start with. Now, number 1, reach out first. Don't wait for others to make the first move and treat it like a standoff, like who's going to connect with the other person first. And then make some time for regular connection. Even if it's a monthly catch-up or a phone call, you can strengthen your friendships. And show up when it counts. Be there not only for the celebrations and the challenging times, but be there for all the times in between. And be honest. So if you have drifted away, say so. Say something like, look, I've really missed you and I'd love to reconnect. And then celebrate your friendships. Mark those anniversaries and the milestones. They're important. And our friendships deserve celebration too. And also remember that science. Friendships don't just make your life richer, they actually make it longer. So people with those strong social ties are 50% more likely to live longer. Friendship really is medicine. Now, I want to talk a little bit on what you might be able to do if a friendship falters or ends. And of course, not all friendships are going to last. Some change, others fade, and a few end altogether. So if it's happened to you, you'll know that it can be one of the most painful parts of midlife if you lose a friendship that once felt unshakable. It can leave you with a sense of sadness, a sense of confusion, or perhaps even a feeling of guilt. And like we said before, friendships can end for many reasons. And sometimes then there could be a misunderstanding or it could be a conflict. Other times it's simply that the connection no longer feels aligned with you or the other person. People change. We change. If you value the friendship and you do want to repair it though, try opening with a conversation and have that with honesty and care. Maybe you can say, I've noticed some distance between us and I miss how things used to be. Can we perhaps talk about it? But if you sense that it's time to let go, do that with compassion for not only yourself, but also for your friend. because you can hold gratitude for what that person has brought to your life while still acknowledging that it is time to move forward separately. And it is okay to grieve that loss. So give yourself the space to feel it, and then allow that space to be filled in time by new people and new experiences that you align with and who aligns with who you are now. Now, if you'd like to reflect more deeply on your friendships, here are just a couple of little prompts to help you think about, or perhaps you might want to journal on after listening. First one, who has been in my life the longest, and what do I do to treasure about that friendship? Another one, which friendships energize me and which ones drain me? What friendships have I grieved or let go of, and what did I learn from them? Where might I open myself to new connections? And what's one small action I could take this week to nurture a friendship that matters? And finally, and how do I want to be remembered as a friend? Now, if you like my idea of a wellness goal, perhaps you might want to build that small micro habit around connection as well, and start reaching out to one person each week. Over time, that one simple habit can transform how you feel and how connected that you are. And as I celebrate 50, 45, and 40 years of friendship with different people, I'm reminded just how lucky I am to have women who have walked beside me through every stage of my life. Friendships like these, they don't stay the same. They grow, they change, they stretch, and they morph. They bring laughter, they bring understanding, shared history, and just that whole comfort of being seen for who you really are. So make the time for the people in your life who matter, because your friendships are not only just good for your heart, they are good for your health. And midlife, it's not a time of doing things on your own. It's a time to walk with the people who lift you up, who remind you who you are, and who have seen every single version of you, and they still choose to stay. That's special. So until next week, take care. Remember to check in with a friend that you haven't caught up with lately, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.